Welcome back. I am John P. Today we're going to be talking about a topic that I think does not receive enough attention. This is going to be water resistance ratings on watches. I see somewhat frequently different service requests at our service center at delraywatch.com where people expose their watches to water in a way that maybe they thought that they could, depending on the type of watch that it is. And I'm here to kind of share with those that are new to collecting, but also a little bit of a reminder to people that maybe have been around for a while, a more realistic approach to certain water resistance features and functions and situations that could put your watch into risk. Today, when especially watch brands have kind of bumped up their service price because they have such a flood of new service requests at the brands, because there's many more watch collectors, there's many more watches in circulations, but there's not more watchmakers. There's actually quite a shortage for considering the demand for watches today. It's just not something you want to go through the water repair process, especially waiting for the brand, which could have your watch for many, many months, sometimes even years, depending what was damaged, the parts, the brand, the dial, so on and so forth. So I'm going to share with you some things that I've picked up along the way, but actually I do want to share with you two things. First, on the wrist today is a Breitling Endurance Pro. I've been wearing this watch so much. I really actually enjoy it. I love it. I know there's a lot of hate for quartz watches or plastic watches or polymer, however you want to say it, but I think just so light, rugged, durable, and it's just different, right? It always kind of perplexes me to see someone hate watches as their hobby. I understand the enjoying and the liking of watches, but I think, the hating of certain watches is kind of weird. Nonetheless, I do see it in the comments below. Not everyone likes it. I think it's cool. Don't worry, I haven't gotten rid of any of my mechanical, automatic, or manual wind watches, but I really like kind of the versatility of this. What can I say? And I also want to share with you that we're giving away a very cool fragment design collaboration Tag Heuer watch at delraywatch.com, where we buy, sell, trade watches. We're going to be giving this away. All you basically have to do is just sign up for our newsletter. Maybe once a week or once every 2 weeks, we send you the latest watches, typically before they hit the site, but sometimes they're there first. And that's basically all we do. We promise not to spam you. We try not to send too many emails, but that's kind of the frequency. So if you sign up there, we're going to be giving away the watch. There'll be a link down in the description of this video below where you can see more about the details. But it's a pretty good value, and all you have to do is share your email address. So, water resistance ratings on watches. Most watches today have some level of water resistance, and it's understandable because even going out in the rain or washing your hands, a certain level of water resistance rating is really needed. And when we think about Rolex particularly, which was really one of the first brands to kind of coin a waterproof style case with the Oyster style case, now we've kind of transitioned into calling it from waterproof to water resistant, actually, because water resistance is always up to generally a depth or a pressure rating. Now, you may see things like Atmos on a dial, which generally is 10 times the Atmos is going to give you the meters rating. And that's generally, how deep of a rating of water resistance. But sometimes you see it in feet as well. Varies between brands, styles, variations, watches, so many other factors, but you do see the different depth ratings. Now, something to keep in mind is many people will say, oh, well, if it's rated to whatever, 10 meters, a certain number of meters, well, as long as you're not going that deep, you should be fine. But that's not always the case because it's rated in a way where it's pressure equivalent, right? So if you're doing extreme water sports, for example, get your mind out of the gutter, fellas. If you're doing extreme water sports, skiing or water skiing or wakeboarding or something like that, or maybe even just wrestling around in the water, I guess, there's a greater increased pressure of the water resistance on that particular watch, in which case it's going to be kind of giving you the equivalent of a deeper depth rating. Now, there's much more to that, and I know people will chime in the comments below, but it's something to consider that the depth is not always the depth. And actually, this is being brought up by someone that I know. They were wearing a vintage Datejust in a hot tub, and they tell me, oh, I didn't take it very deep at all, and inside the crystal it kind of fogged up. Now, this isn't a watch that I had any connection with, but I asked them the last time that they had the watch serviced, and they said, oh, I think I had it serviced in 1985. Well, the thing to keep in mind is as time goes on with that watch, the seals, as well as different factors such as the construction of the watch, how the crystal is placed, the crystal construction, the types of, there's different waterproofing features or water resistant features on many different styles of watches, but the rubber gaskets will wear away and they'll erode, especially if you expose the watch to chemicals such as chlorine in pools and hot tubs, the different chemicals in steam rooms, for example. And of course, there's certain functions of thermodynamics that is going to change the water resistance rating of the hot air, the cold air, the way that all of that behaves. And so it's not just a water resistance rating. And so I see people that will say, hey, I got some, fog in my crystal, or I got some water in my watch. Why could this have happened? And my best advice generally is, if it's a situation where you're not really needing the watch for that purpose, why take the risk of this expensive item potentially, if it's, potentially a very high and expensive watch? Why expose the watch to that kind of scenario if you don't have to? Maybe pop on a more affordable or approachable watch. And I know people say, well, I should be able to, but there is just a certain reality sometimes in life where, right, not everything can be idealized, and maybe it should be able to, but maybe it's not. And why take that risk? And so people go into the steam room all the time wearing their Royal Oaks, or they jump in the hot tub, all this stuff. And I generally advise, hey, not best practice. You're only going to be putting extra stress on that watch. Why take that risk if you don't have to? And with modern watches, okay, fine, you can get away with it, especially if it's coming from the factory or the assembly, a production facility somewhat recently. But when you start getting the watch a little bit older, start getting into vintage watches, things don't always work as they should. And I'll tell you that if you do get water damage in a watch, especially a watch that's going to be, maybe closer to that end of warranty period, and you call the brands, the customer service line, they just are not going to care. Now, this is me just saying this, right? But I hear this all the time from people. They get a new watch from a brand and they somehow do get water damage. Maybe they push the chronograph pushers, which you should not do, even if it's a Breitling, supposedly a watch that can handle that. I don't recommend this. The brands are trying to find ways to make the watch water resistant, but maybe it's not. In that one instance, maybe you got the one that had a fluke that wasn't perfect. It happens. And so people get water in the watch and they reach out to the brand, and the brand generally, from what I hear and see, is just going to say, well, you probably had the crown unscrewed because all of our watches leave the factory with water resistance ratings. We have these strict testing, blah, 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 blah. And that's their position. And you're talking to someone in customer service that is going to be somewhat scripted and maybe not know what you were doing with the watch, and they produce so many. They're not going to just believe you, because so many people do leave the crown unscrewed. So many people that buy watches don't really know how the watches work. Believe it or not, I know it's tough to believe as enthusiasts and collectors like we are, but it happens all the time. People don't know that an automatic watch has to be wound and that you have to screw down the crown. I have people that will ask me to change the time on their watch because they couldn't pull out the crown, not realizing it had a screw down crown. I see this. It does happen. So especially when you get into vintage watches, it's just not reasonable to expect it to remain watertight forever, especially if you don't keep up with the seals, the servicing. It's just not best practice. Now, obviously, you're free to do as you'd like. And I'll also put a link down below where you can see kind of different water resistance ratings and recommended types of activities that you can go ahead and engage in and be relatively safe, assuming other things are okay, like the watch is somewhat of a newer watch. But generally, guys, please keep the vintage watches out of water, because keep in mind also, if something does get damaged, you have to send it in for service. You're probably going to get service parts. The parts are going to be newer. It's going to take away value from the watch as well. Stay away from it. Get a watch maybe that's a little more approachable and enjoy your watches in this way. Might not happen to everyone, but if it does happen to you, trust me, water damage in a watch is not fun to deal with. So guys, what do we think about this? I know a bit of a refresher for some of those that have been out there, but I do see people kind of get a little lazy with it and just jump in, the pool, for example, with like vintage chronographs. What do we think? Any water stories? Would love to see it in here at the comments below, guys. Please do not forget to go ahead over to Delray Watch, fill out the newsletter, sign up so that you can be entered to win the Tag Heuer watch. Also, please do not forget to thumbs up, like, and subscribe. It really does help and go a long way. We'll see you next time. You've been chatting with John P.